support, I feel most encouraged, and I want to publicly extend my heartfelt gratitude to all who have sent their congratulatory remarks and made me feel more confident in this role. With that being said, Madam Presiding Officer, I will now turn my attention to the substantive matter, which is the motion today, which deals with an allocation from the central government to Tobago that is fair, reasonable, and just. A just, reasonable, and fair share of the national budget in the upcoming 2025 fiscal package, which would be presented by the Minister of Finance on September 30th, 2024. Madam Presiding Officer, as you all know, I've worked within the technical sphere of the Tobago House of Assembly as both Senior Financial Analyst and Chief Management Accountant. And I had the unfettered professional intimacy with the operations of the entire THE, looking at the financial and fiscal ecosystem of the organization. And Madam Presiding Officer, you know what? At the end of the day, when I look at it from every direction, we have one common thing that I've noticed is that the Tobago House of Assembly suffers from insufficiencies in its finances. Simply put, not enough money is available to pay our bills and fund the island's critical development needs. Adjacent to the Chief Secretary's contribution, I would like to add some critical insights into this debate. And I will also share some of the measures and key challenges and implications currently facing the Tobago House of Assembly as a result of the persistent minimalist 4.3% that we have been getting from successive central governments. Madam Presiding Officer, the starting point of this debate, as every debater and even the Chief Secretary presented on, is the report of the DRC that was made in September 2000. And the Commission considered that a percentage of 4.03% is the starting point, right? It's the starting point to determining what is fair and practicable in the allocation of the resources to the THA. And at that time, that lower limit represented the percentage of Tobago's population, represented Tobago's population as a percentage of the national population. And it's important to know, Madam Presiding Officer, that Tobago's population has since grown from 4.58% in 2001 to now is about 5.1%. And therefore, at a minimum, Tobago should receive 5.1% of the national pie. I wish to also raise another critical issue that was read and laid in the DRC's report, and in section 6.4, and it states, whatever percentage is arrived at should be reflected not only in the parliamentary allocation, but particularly in the releases made by central government to the Assembly, so that some degree of parity would be achieved. And this is the point I want to expand on today. But before I expand on those points and bring the relevant figures and facts, because we're hearing talk about you're having more allocation, today what I will do is lay the facts and the truth on the table about the figures, the shortfalls, the underfunding, and the inherited liabilities that this Tobago House of Assembly had to work with. Madam Presiding Officer, let me now talk about these shortfalls. The Tobago House of Assembly really received allocations, and we're only looking at a period from 2017. We can go way back, but let's look at from 2017 to as recent as 2023. We have seen where the government underfunded, or we have a shortfall. They didn't give us all our allocations to the tune of $166.4 million, and I will disaggregate it for you. This worked out an average of about $23.8 million per year. These cuts in the Assembly's allocation actually takes place on the last day of the fiscal year, on September 30th, and we are drawing near. On Monday, we will recognize how much short we will be for fiscal 2024, because it has not changed. But we will change it in this attempt. And I wish to say that this organized and calculated campaign is a financial attack against Tobago. Madam Presiding Officer, the net-off process works like this. If Parliament says we're going to allocate $200 to the Assembly for a fiscal year, for the THA now has to collect taxes of $50. Then the Ministry of Finance, ideally if we do the maths, should give releases to the THA of $150. No less. It can be more according to the law, but it should be no less. What the government has been doing from 2017 is to release less than $150 to the THA, which contributes to an ambush on the financial entitlement and the integrity of the Tobago House of Assembly. And the implications of this practice to the Assembly is far and wide, and I'm going to get into it. It's worth noting here again that the cuts to the allocation takes place, as I said, on the last day, without any consultation with the THA, without any discussion, and without any notification by the central government. And the reality of the situation is that the THA's program of expenditure for the fiscal years are in keeping with our allocation. If we say we're going to do something that costs $50, but you give us $40, it is impossible for us to complete these projects because we are just not receiving the releases in accordance with our planned program of works. Therefore, when the central government takes an unlawful and inhumane decision to unilaterally reduce the THA's allocations, it's actually forcing us to carry over the liabilities to the next fiscal period. And I'll tell everyone, I'll tell Tobago this, what we are suffering here, why we cannot pay our bills, is because we have inherited liabilities from since the Assembly was in the hands of the People's National Movement. Today, I am armed with the data and the understanding. And I will let you know that the Honorable Chief Secretary wrote to both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance, highlighting these concerns about the shortfall of the $166.4 million owed to Tobago to be made available to the THA in order to aid us in liquidating the current liabilities that we now face. Madam Presiding Officer, another issue relating to the parliamentary appropriation is the releases to the Assembly. And this is what the law actually states this in section 47. It says that money is appropriated by Parliament for the service of the financial year of the Assembly shall be credited to the fund in quarterly releases in advance or block. But what the law is really saying here, Madam Presiding Officer, is that the central government must give Tobago its allocation upfront, 3 months upfront, in advance. And this provision, really in this law, was designed to ensure that the THA gets enough money to meet its estimated 3 months of operational and development expenditures. Madam Presiding Officer, this clear violation of the law really started to happen in 2017 when the government started to give the Assembly releases monthly. And Madam Presiding Officer, I want you to allow me to go through the figures. We're doing facts and figures as the accountant and the Secretary of Finance here today. Yes. We're not coming to talk about is the largest allocation, is the largest budget. Obviously, if you're giving me 4% of something larger, it means 4% of the larger amount. So, but I'll show you, although the appropriated sum was larger, the releases did not prove to be larger. And because we are receiving our allocations late, it's not according to the law, it's not quarterly or block in advance, we in the THA have to now absorb an expense called overdraft interest. And I will explain to Tobago how much overdraft interest we have had to incur. Now, I'm only going for the last 7 years. We are doing from 2017 to 2023. And I'll bring 2024 figures when I'm doing the recalibrated budget to show that this has not changed. However, I will prove to you that this administration reduced the overdraft interest because our Honorable Chief Secretary, when he was the Secretary of Finance, I think it was about a month into office or less, went down to the minister and said, we are not going to accept this 1 month releases. We cannot plan, we cannot pay. We're losing the trust and confidence of the people because we could not pay our bills on time. We also have the snowballing effect of this overdraft interest, which is sitting in our fund account right now. The balances that we have in the account are not real. They are not notional. They do not represent this administration's operations. It's an inherited debt from how many years ago, but I'm only going to highlight it for the last 7 years. So let's go with the numbers, because the member on the other side, on our side here from Mason Hall, Mariah, is saying that numbers don't lie. So let's start with fiscal 2017. The appropriation that was passed in the Act of Parliament was $2.045 billion, Madam Presiding Officer. The releases that we received from Trinidad, meaning the checks, the cash, the checks that came from the Treasury, was $1,781,174,412. We received and collected revenues of $207,248,122. So the total releases we received was $1,988,422,534. Obviously, there's a shortfall. If the appropriation say getting $2,045,000, there's no way we should end September 30th, 2017 with $1,988,425,34, and that's a shortfall of $56.5 million. In that same year, the overdraft didn't start the 1 month yet. We probably was getting it probably 2 months, or whenever the Ministry of Finance decided to send the releases. The overdraft interest in that year was $3,135,833, but it gets worse. In fiscal 2018, this was the year when the government said, I can't give you your releases. However, they were giving it. They start giving you 1 month. Meaning, in the month of October, you're getting a release somewhere down by the end of October. In November, you're getting a check somewhere down by the 30th. How can you get monies to service Tobago at the end of the month? You know what that means? You have to activate an overdraft.
Minority Leader.
The appropriation in that year under recurrent was $1,859,990,000. They supplemented the allocation. They gave us $100 million more. And the final appropriation was $1,959,990,000. And you know how much cash releases we got in terms of checks from central government? $1,722,621,245. That is $1.7 billion. We collected revenues of about $204.5 million. So in the end, on September 30th, the Assembly was supposed to have 1.959 for the entire year. We received 1.927, 109,833, a difference of 33,820,167. You all want to hear how much the overdraft fees were? And I need to tell lie. 10 million. Wow. 10,999,156. And you know what? We sat and we were okay with that. But you know who is suffering the consequences of that now? We are. And I am not here as Secretary of Finance because it's me peddling. I have children in Tobago. We cannot leave this legacy for our children to take care of. We have to fix this. This has to fix. And as I go later down, you would see how the fix has started with the Honorable Chief Secretary as leader. And we will continue to fight to ensure that these injustices stop. Let's go to fiscal 2019. The appropriation was $1.979 billion. Cash releases, $1,762,220,194. We collected revenues at the Board of Inland Revenue and other revenues of the THE of $200,494,115. Total cash releases, $1,962,714,309. A shortfall of $16.285 million. You want to hear how much the overdraft interest was? Because it's still collecting the thing 1 month, meaning the releases for the month of October, you're getting it either end of October or November. Releases for November, you're receiving it either in November late, December. Every month you're getting it. You can't plan it. The overdraft interest was $9,971,292. In fiscal 2020, same thing. Appropriation, $2,033,000,000. We got a supplementation, we got an extra $50 million, and it came up to $2,083 million. Cash releases from central government, $1,861,914,290. We collected revenues of $195,909,626. Total cash releases of $2,057,823,916. A shortfall of $25.1 million. In that year, our overdraft interest was $1,737 again. So you start to see is in the millions. And this overdraft is a non-budgetary expenditure. You know what that means? We don't take monies from the allocation and pay the overdraft interest, you know. The bank takes the overdraft interest and it reduces the releases of the Tobago House of Assembly. So you're not able to do as much as you wish. Fiscal 2021, $1,916,000,000, a supplementary release of $50 million. It came up to $1,966,000,000. Cash releases from central government, $1,773,101,727. The revenues collected from tax and non-tax revenues of $184,862,023. Total releases of $1,957,993,750. A shortfall of $8 million. And the overdraft interest in that year was $8,713,143. And this is where the pivot occurred. In fiscal 2022, this administration, we received $2,075,000,000, for the original recurrent allocation. We got a $60 million supplementary. It went up to $2,135,000,000. Cash releases from the government, $1,934,222,187. Tax and non-tax revenues collected, $188,533,992. That is total releases of $2,122,776,179. Shortfall of $12 million. But you know how much the overdraft interest was? Because the Honorable Chief Secretary, some days after coming into office, went and said, I cannot accept getting my releases 1 month. And he was negotiating, you know, he said. I think the Minister of Finance at that time had said, don't quote me, I think he did say the government did not have the sufficient resources to give us quarterly outlook in advance. The chief secretary at the time did indicate, all right, we'll take it 2 months, 1 month. So it therefore means in October, we'll have the monies for October, November, and in December, we receive that 1 month. The overdraft interest went down. Now I wish the overdraft interest could be zero, but it went down to 2,677,372. Now I heard the minority leader talk about failure. You know what was failure? Failure was having overdraft interest of $10 million, $8 million, $9 million.
Members.
But you know when we see the light?
Members.
We see improvement.
Secretary Roberts, hold one moment, please. Member for Mason Hall. This is the Secretary's maiden contribution. Please allow her to contribute uninterrupted. Please. Continue, Secretary Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. And I'll just quickly wrap up and let's talk about last fiscal year. The allocation was $2,193,816,632 cash releases from the central government, $1,963,719,748. And tax and non-tax revenues collected, $214,881,692, with an accumulated total of $2,178,601,440, another shortfall of about $15.2 million, and our overdraft interest went down to the lowest in the last 7 years of $2.1 million. So although I'm speaking of reductions in the overdraft interest, I approached the Minister of Finance last month in August, and I said to him, this $45 million in overdraft interest, you have to give us the funding to cover this. Because this funding has eroded the positive position of our releases in our fund account right now. And the minister said, and I'm glad it's on the Hansard records, I will consider it. $166.3 million is owed to Tobago today for within the last 7 years. I can do an exercise and I could go way back. But in all fairness, because of the time value of money, and after a while things become statute bar after 7 years, let's go with the last 7 years. Tobago deserves this $166.3, particularly if our colleagues here on the other side is saying that we have received all this money and the highest allocation ever, but we never received the cash. I want Tobago to bear that in mind. We have a parliamentary appropriation that is an act of parliament where they say, I'm going to give you $200. Please give Tobago the $200.
Member, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, allow me to go to the point of the bond and the repayments of the bond. Now, in recent meetings with the Minister of Finance, we raised the matter again, as I must tell this Honorable House. On August 30th, I went to the Minister of Finance with 10 issues, and the issue of the bond repayment is one of the very critical issues that was brought to his attention. And the reason being is because the previous administration in May 2021 received 163. I'm giving you the exact figure. The bond was 164, but we had some fees that we had to pay because you're making investments and FCB is working for us. We had to pay some fees and it came out of the bond. they had at liberty and privilege $163 million that was used to do emergency restoration works and road restoration. How are the roads feeling today? I raised this matter with the Minister of Finance, Madam Presiding Officer, and that we get an appropriate allocation in fiscal 2025 to meet the overdraft payment to which he indicated his willingness to do so. Madam Presiding Officer, we have to make a bullet payment of $164.1 million in fiscal 2025. We approached the Minister of Finance. Because of fiscal prudence, we are saying, give us some funding to put into a sinking fund, an interest-bearing fund, so that when fiscal 27 comes, we wouldn't have to pay this full amount from our appropriation. Now, we have clearly indicated to the Minister of Finance during the recent meetings that the Assembly will not be able to meet this allocation in 2027, given the current minimalist percentage of 4.3% of the allocation. So this is the options that we asked the Minister to take into consideration. One, provide us with the funds. Now, these funds have to be separate and apart from the appropriation, because it is virtually impossible to give us 4.3%, which would give us somewhere around 2.2 billion under recurrent, and still be able to take that bond money that already spent is a sunk cost for us. Because I don't see the benefit. I don't know if you all seen the benefit of it, Madam Presiding Officer. That we will have to find $164 million in one bullet payment to the investors. We have also asked the Minister to approve the underwriting of these bonds for a further maybe 5 years or so, as we may not be able to pay the bullet payment in 2027. And the Minister has expressed his willingness to work with option 2, which is to underwrite and extend the bond for some years to come. Another critical matter that was brought to the attention of the Minister was that of the oil spill. And you will recall that the oil spill caused the Tobago House of Assembly to utilize its contingency funds of $15 million because we did not have the resources to pay for the cleanup. And Madam Presiding Officer, we received, the oil spill started in February, early February, and we were forced to use $15 million from our contingency fund, and the $50 million that the government sent during the midterm came on July 17.
Member, your time is up.
Madam Presiding Officer, I beg to move that we extend the speaking time for Councillor Roberts, Secretary of Finance.
Honorable members, the question is that an additional 10 minutes of speaking time is given to Councillor Petalan Roberts to conclude her presentation. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Councillor Roberts, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. And that $50 million, we received that in July of 2024, to be exact, several months after the oil spill had occurred. And this is the kind of problems we are receiving from the central government. We have to go begging. And imagine this is a catastrophe. A disaster occurred on the island, and we had to wait 4-5 months before we could receive funding from the central government. And the funding was not even sufficient to cover the liabilities, as we still have invoices amounting to somewhere close to $10 million. Madam Presiding Officer, I want to go now to the midterm request. And You will recall that the Minister of Finance, by way of the budget review, increased the national budget by $2,328,099,600, and Tobago was only allocated $50 million to meet the oil spill expenditure. This emergency funding really and truly should not be counted as part of the Assembly's appropriation by Parliament for fiscal 2024. As a matter of fact, we requested from the ministry monies to pay off our contractors of $100 million, overdraft interest that I just calculated here for you, the overdraft interest of $46.5 million, and that's what it was at the time. Madam Presiding Officer, given the minimalist 4.3% share campaign, the Assembly should have really received supplementary allocation of $100 million. Let me give you the math. The supplementary appropriation, when the government went back to the midterm, they increased the entire budget for the country by $2,328,099,600. And if you multiply that by 4.3%, we should have really gotten $100.1 million in the fiscal mid-year review. You know how much we received? $50 million for the oil spill. For the oil spill. Here again, the central government has unlawfully denied Tobagonians of an extra $50.1 million in revenues to fund their development and to pay their bills. I hope that those on the minority side will tell their imperialists in Trinidad, in Port of Spain, to send Tobago the balance of funds by Monday. I want to bring to your attention another issue, and this issue doesn't have to do with parliamentary appropriation, but it has to do with a scenario where another disaster occurred in Tobago. You all remember Hurricane Beryl, Madam Presiding Officer? It visited Tobago and left trails of damages in our path. The Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility is a regional insurance mechanism designed to help Caribbean and Central American governments quickly access financial resources in the aftermath of natural disasters. It was established in 2007 to provide rapid payouts to member countries affected by major catastrophic events such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and excessive rainfall. So the government pays a premium for this insurance in case of a catastrophe or disaster. Now, as a direct consequence of Beryl, the insurance facility has stated in their report that there are governmental losses. Countries had losses. So 2 other countries of the Caribbean were reported in that report, as well as Trinidad and Tobago. According to the report, the government of Trinidad and Tobago has 2 tropical cyclone policies. So there are 2 policies, one specific for Trinidad and one for Tobago. You know why? Tobago is not joined with Trinidad. We are separate. So it's 2 separate policies. And in the report, there was a payout. For Tobago, US $372,752. And I did it in TT. So in TT, I used maybe 6.8%. 6.8, sorry, dollars, sorry, the foreign. So it's $2,534,713.60 payable for Tobago as a result of Beryl. For Trinidad, the payout was US $56,502.30. I'm not going to calculate that in TT because it's not relevant here for us today. So I approached the minister as one of the 10 issues.
Member, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. One of the 10 issues faced by Tobago, and I said, Minister, how can Tobago access this funding? And the minister's response was, you don't pay the premium, you ain't getting no payout. Tobago people, I want you to understand that under the office of the Chief Secretary, and the Chief Secretary can bring the figures. I don't have the figures right here, but we have bills for burial of about $500,000 at the office of the Chief Secretary that we cannot pay because the line item that we utilize to pay for these types of emergencies, 36 extraordinary expenditure, we are over right now because of the oil spill. But we got a payout on an insurance policy, and the minister has said to me, you don't pay no premium. You can't get that money. A premium that is paid for Trinidad, two separate policies, one for Trinidad and one for Tobago. Pay attention. So therefore, I did a kind of quick tally of the monies that are owed to the Tobago House of Assembly from all these things. Now, we're talking 4.3%. I ain't talking percent anymore. I'm talking monetary terms. About $45 million in overdraft interest, $166.4 million due to the shortfall. We want our $2,534,714 for burial. We need the $50 million extra. When you multiply $2.5 billion by 4.3, because when you did the first appropriation, you gave us 4.3. You increased the budget by $2.5 billion, and we only received half of what we were supposed to receive. So the government has $50 million still for us. There was also a grant from CAF, the Development Bank of Latin America. They indicated that they gave Trinidad and Tobago US $200,000 for the oil spill. We ain't seen it yet. You know why? It's still in Port of Spain. And the minister said that is part of the $50 million I gave you on the appropriation. Appropriated funds and grant funding cannot mix. Can't mix the funding. Madam Presiding Officer, this is a harsh reality that we face. We don't have enough money. We are owed funding from central government, and we can't borrow. This has been the fourth cumulative experience of the Assembly occasioned by the 4.3% shortage that we have been experiencing. And I also want to lay on record that on Monday, I did an exercise with all divisions. And we now have instituted a debt management tracker in the Tobago House of Assembly at the Division of Finance. And I've started this debt management tracker because I want, as Secretary of Finance, to know what the position is of the Tobago House of Assembly in terms of its debts. Our debts total $1 billion. The current liabilities that must roll over into fiscal 2025 that we just cannot pay right now is $100 million cumulatively by divisions. We owe contractors about $450 million from before 2021. We owe funding because we just had to do...
Your time is up.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Do we have any more presenters to this debate? Please indicate via Councillor Daniel, Minority Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, for the opportunity to contribute to this debate. And I want to join in welcoming all the members back to the House and our new member, the Secretary of Finance, as well as we welcome Clerk of the House. So, Madam Presiding Officer, I see before us today there are two options on the table. And one option is continuing to do the same thing as the Chief Secretary would have indicated in a previous incarnation, or two, as the amendment by the minority leader would have alluded to do something different and expect a more favorable result. the Chief Secretary would have gone through a number of years indicating to us from governments, be it PNM, be it UNC partnership, whoever is in the Tobago House of Assembly administration, be it the NAR, PNM, that there has been successive need for greater funding. So it doesn't matter which administration is in office in the Tobago House of Assembly or in the central government. The Chief Secretary proved the point that the allocation remained between 4.3% and 4.4%. And I think what the Chief Secretary would have done is to build the case that the People's National Movement manage the resources that they receive prudently. Madam Presiding Officer, if we go to some of the comments, and I want to go to the comment of the allocation for URP and CPEP. And the Chief Secretary spoke to a cost of $23 million for CPEP in fiscal 2023 and $60 million for URP in the same fiscal year. But Madam Presiding Officer, this is something that successive PNM administration had to deal with because the allocation has been 18 million, 20 million, 9 million consecutive years from 2017 to present. So if we go to 2017, Madam Presiding Officer, the former administration, which was the PNM, had the expenditure for URP was $54.9 million. The allocation at the time was $20 million. CPEP, the expenditure on CPEP in 2017 was $25.63 million. The allocation for CPEP at that time was $8 million. So, Madam Presiding Officer, the former administration also had to supplement the funding, and they had to find it to ensure that people are paid on time. Similarly, in 2019, URP, the total expenditure was $39 million, CPEP $22 million. In 2020, URP $51.6 million, CPEP $22.06 million. So, Madam Presiding Officer, what this Chief Secretary has brought to the House is something that has happened in the past, and the People's National Movement Administration, Tobago House of Assembly, PNM administration managed with less. So this is nothing new. So the Chief Secretary is behaving as if this is the first time that the THA is receiving an allocation that is less than what the expenditure is. And Madam Presiding Officer, what the Tobago House of Assembly has at its disposal, that when they receive the allocation in block, let's say 2.5 billion and the 2.3 billion disaggregated between recurrent and development program, the Tobago House of Assembly, through the Executive Council, has the ability to reallocate and reapportion based on its priorities. So if, for instance, there is a line item that is not adequately funded, the Tobago House of Assembly has the opportunity to reallocate the funding where it sees necessary. And unlike other ministries in central government, they have to go back to Parliament to do that reallocation. And the Tobago House of Assembly, under this new dispensation, it is clear that they are unable to manage the resources that they currently have. And I want to join with the Chief Secretary in saying that it is really not an issue of funding. It is an issue of how you manage the funds that is given to you. And we have seen clearly over the 3 years that they have received over $7 billion, and they have not properly accounted to the people on how they spend that money, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, I want to go to another point, that the member for Canaan, Bonaccord Crown Point, and the Secretary of Community Development. Madam Presiding Officer, the Secretary spoke about disrespect and not the funding that is received is not in keeping with the law. Madam Presiding Officer, the dispute resolution indicated that the funding should be between 4.03% and 6.8%. So if we have, yes, we are receiving the lower end, but if we are receiving 4.4%, it is within the ambit of the law, Madam Presiding Officer. And we on this side, we are not saying that it is sufficient, Presiding Officer. And we on this side, we are not saying that it is sufficient. We agree that we need more funding, but Madam Presiding Officer, it has to be demonstrated that you can manage what you currently have. And again, this administration has not demonstrated that it could manage what it currently has. We have a situation, Madam Presiding Officer, where with the airport expansion project, the central government proposed to undertake a road project in keeping with the ANI airport expansion. And this was the Friendship Connector Road. The scope included land acquisition and resident relocation, establishment of the new road right-of-way, 36 meters proposed, construction of a 4-lane roadway, upgrade to the Shervan and Claude Noel Road intersections, construction of a utility corridor to accommodate all utilities, example Wassa and Tiantec, construction of all associated draining works, slope stabilization works, upgrade to Tobago Local Road, construction of 2 roundabouts, beautification, landscaping along the new access road at a proposed cost of $131 million. We have a situation right now, Madam Presiding Officer, where we are at the House at this present time saying that we are underfunded and the central government is disrespecting us, but the central government was willing to propose and undertake this project in the sum of $131, but we decided that we have the resources to do it, so we will do it. And what is now taking place is that instead of a 4-lane, we have a 2-lane. Yes, we have 2 roundabouts, but one of them, residents are complaining almost every day about how the roundabout is and whether or not accidents may occur on the roundabout. And Madam Presiding Officer, if you have a situation where your projects are funded to the tune of $131 million, won't you, as a right-thinking Tobago and a responsible Tobago House of Assembly, accept and collaborate with the central government to undertake this project? You have decided not to do so. And now you are spending over $50-something million, and that is $50-something million and counting, because the road is currently under litigation. So legal fees will be associated with this project, Madam Presiding Officer. So as simple as that. You can't collaborate with the central government on a project that will benefit all of Tobago, yet you come running to the House asking for greater funding, when there's an opportunity right there to get greater funding, Madam Presiding Officer. So, Madam Presiding Officer, there are several cases of this administration inability to manage what they currently have. Madam Presiding Officer, we have a situation, again, under this administration, where the cost of rent and lease to the THA plummeted from 2001 to this current, to 2023. So, Madam Presiding Officer.
Minority Leader, I'm just letting you know that I can hear your utterances. Minority Leader. And I won't allow those type of language in the House. Continue, Minority Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Yes, Madam Presiding Officer, we have a situation with the rent and lease, Madam Presiding Officer. And we have seen where the rent and lease expenditure from 2021 to 2023 ballooned significantly over the period. So, Madam Presiding Officer, we have a situation where in 2021, the rent and lease expenditure, rent and lease vehicles and equipment, this expenditure was 13 million in 2021. It increased to 19 million in 2022, which is approximately 6 million more than it was in 2021. And then in 2023, Madam Presiding Officer, it ballooned to a whopping $39 million. And Madam Presiding Officer, we would like to know what has accounted for this significant increase, and for us on this side, it amounts to wanton wastage. And if you dig a little deeper, under the division of infrastructure, this line item, rent, lease, vehicles and equipment, in 2021, under the division of infrastructure, that expenditure cost was $10 million. In 2022, it was 12 million. And by 2023, Madam Presiding Officer, the expenditure again ballooned to some $35 million. So from the $39 million of the total expenditure by the THA, the Division of Infrastructure, their expenditure was $35 million. So, Madam Officer, again, another instance where this administration has demonstrated that they are unable to adequately manage the resources that they have. Madam Presiding Officer, I also want to turn to a comment made by the Secretary of Education. And the Secretary spoke about, the administration having to move around monies and finding monies to do the things that they deem as priority. But, Madam Presiding Officer, I want to advise the Secretary of Education that is a business of governance. And it is nothing new to, if you don't have the allocation and it is a priority, to look within to find if you see the things as priority. And Madam Presiding Officer, both in Trinidad and Tobago, the resources, the financial resources are limited and infinite. And central government and the Tobago House of Assembly has to manage with what they have. The Secretary spoke to the fact that the Division of Education would have expended $20 million on their school repair program when compared to the ministry. The ministry also spent approximately $20 million for the number of schools that they have. Madam Presiding Officer, if the ministry could have spent more money, because the minister said that there's a need, but right now the resources that they have was $20 million to spend on the school. So, Madam Presiding Officer, it demonstrates right now in this particular instance that the Tobago House of Assembly is in a better situation than the Ministry of Education. So, Madam Presiding Officer, again, is it about managing the resources that the Tobago House of Assembly have. And if you liken it to your own home, you will have a budget. Your financial resources, your pay, any other additional income you have will be finite. But you have priorities in your home. Your children will want more than you have. But you have to prioritize your needs based on the resources that you had. And Madam Presiding Officer, the former Prime Minister said it, that the PNM does make governance look easy.
I thought it was easy.
So when we sat down, did the work, crunched the numbers, identified our priorities, reallocate the funding so that persons could be paid on time, so that people will not be singing for the heritage money, that band leaders don't have to go up to the Secretary of Tourism's office to try to get their monies from her. Prudent management. And Madam Presiding Officer, and the point must be brought home that, and the Secretary of Finance, I think, would have cemented our point in terms of fiscal management. Because the Secretary of Finance went through the allocations or the releases to the THA from 2017 to 2023. In 2017, the Secretary indicated that the total releases to the THA was 1.9 billion. In 2018, similarly, 1.9 billion. 2019, 1.9 billion. 2020, 2 billion. 2021, 1.9 billion. 2022. So 2021 was when the PNM left office. And from 2017 to 2021, based on the information that the Secretary of Finance just gave us, the releases, the total releases to the Tobago House of Assembly was 1.9 billion, save and except 2020, which was 2-point-something billion. In 2022, when this administration came into office, the releases were $2.1 billion, $2 billion. And in 2023, it was a similar $2.1 billion. So, and the Secretary also indicated that in the past, the past administration from 2017 to 2021 was getting the funding month to month, sometimes at the end of the month. But now this administration is receiving the funding 2 months in advance. So, Madam Presiding Officer, you have a situation where you are getting more releases and you are getting it at more favorable terms, but yet still you are unable to manage.
Minority Leader, I would love to hear the Minority Councillor in her presentation by herself, please.
Yes, so it is clear, Madam Presiding Officer, that the PNM did an awesome job in office. And again, another demonstration where the PNM made governance look easy. So, Madam Presiding Officer, the Minority Leader would have made an amendment to the motion. And before I go into the amendment, I want to give another example of mismanagement. So, Madam Presiding Officer, the Chief Secretary would have commissioned an audit when they came into office because it was presumed that there was some level of corruption in 3 programs. I think it was road resurfacing, agriculture access road, emergency works. The Chief Secretary would have also brought into the House the preliminary findings of the audit. And the Chief Secretary would have identified a number of areas that they think was, or based on the audit report, there was over excess spending. And the Chief Secretary would have indicated one in particular in terms of hot mix, that the hot mix cost, and the Minority Leader would have spoken about it a bit, that the cost to place the hot mix was of $1,400 per ton was inflated. Madam Presiding Officer, we would have received information and we would have done a comparative analysis of the costs that were charged under the previous administration and the cost that is currently being incurred under this administration. And for that particular item in terms of to supply and place hot mix or asphalt, this administration, so the $1,400 per ton that was inflated, this administration is prepared to pay $2,700.
Members, for the last time, please turn your phones off or place them on silent. I've had too many interruptions with phones for the day. Continue.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, we had another instance, provision for erection and maintenance of project signs and directional informative signs. Under the past administration, this cost was $80,000. Under this administration, they are paying $232,000, a difference of $52,000.
Minority Leader.
Protection/relocation of utilities. Under the past arrangement, it was $40,000. Under this current administration, the cost is $325,000, a difference of $285,000. Provision for health and safety. Past administration, the cost was $108,000. This administration, the cost is $448,000, a difference of $340,000. Provision of general environmental requirements. Past administration, $200,000. This administration, $445,000, a difference of $245,000. And Madam Presiding Officer, under most of the line items, the cost is twice and triple, sometimes 4 times. There's another to broom and clean roadway. $432,000 under the past administration. This administration is $1.665 million, a difference of $1.233 million. So, Madam Presiding Officer, I will submit that if this administration manages the resources that they have more prudently, it will go a long way in the benefit of all Tobagonians. Madam Presiding Officer, I also want to rebut a point by the Secretary of Finance. The Secretary of Finance spoke to the fact that bond financing was received in the tune of $163 million. And Madam Presiding Officer, I am quoting here now from a monthly budget report that was laid today in the House as at the end of June 2024. And the Secretary of Finance indicated that the entire bond funding that was received was expended by the last administration, and we don't know where the money gone, and it was used to do emergency roads, and she asked the question if we see any road works done. But Madam Presiding Officer, based on this statement, under number 7, it says special purpose account, and it reads, the Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy, in accordance with Part 4, Paragraph 51B of the THA Act 40 of 1996, received the approval from the Minister of Finance in fiscal 2021 to acquire funding through the issuance of a THA bond. The total sum derived therefrom was $163,558,188. $106,222,219 and $57,335,969 were released to divisions in fiscal 2021 and fiscal 2022 respectively. Madam Presiding Officer, I want to pause because in fiscal 2022, the Tobago House of the People's National Movement was not in office. So to indicate that the former administration spent the entire 163.
Member, you have 4 minutes.
Based on this statement, Madam Presiding Officer, that information is inaccurate, and I thought it necessary to correct the records, Madam Presiding Officer. The statement further went on to say that as at the 30th of June 2024, divisions, departments were not authorized to spend from the Special Purpose Account THA Bond. Actual expenditure and commitments were recorded at nil. So, Madam Presiding Officer, in my wind-up, I want to go back to where I started, and I think we have two options: continue what we're doing or do something differently. And for us on this side, Madam Presiding Officer, there are two bills currently before the Parliament, and they not only offer us increased fiscal independence, but they offer us lawmaking powers. They offer us the ability to have a minimum parliamentary allocation of 6.8% or $4 billion when compared to 4.03% or $2.3 billion. With the bills in Parliament, we will have lawmaking powers, I indicated before, which we currently do not have. A fiscal review commission with authority to recommend additional funding for Tobago. And, Madam Presiding Officer, the Chief Secretary, in piloting the bill, again, he expressed the fact that consecutive administration, be it PNM, UNC, whoever, they have not given the THA at the upper end. So if we have a minimum of 6.8%, Madam Presiding Officer, then I don't think we have to be here today admonishing the minister to give us more funding. So, Madam Presiding Officer, in conclusion, and Madam Presiding Officer, yes, the Chief Secretary indicated that within the ambits of the law that we are not receiving, and there is the authority to give the 6.8, but the Chief Secretary, I think, answered his own question. So successive governments have not done it, and with the current legislation, we are not saying that the legislations are perfect, but we would have moved. We would have moved from county council to the establishment of the Tobago House of Assembly in 1980. We moved again from the 1980 Act to Act 40 of 1996. None of those legislations were perfect, but it helped us to advance our economy and to advance the development of Tobago. And what we are saying that this administration, though imperfect, will move us along the development trajectory. So, Madam Presiding Officer, again, as I wind up, I want to say that the motion that is currently before us.
Member, your time is up.
Madam Presiding Officer, I wish to move that the speaking time of the member be extended by an additional 10 minutes.
Honorable members, the question is that an additional 10 minutes of speaking time be given to the member to conclude her presentation. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Member, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, and I want to thank my fellow members for giving me an extended time. I don't think I would need a full 10 minutes. So, Madam Presiding Officer, in my wind-up, I would like to say that by the admission of the Chief Secretary and his team, all of Tobago and all of Trinidad and Tobago are now seeing that the administration is not able to fix the things that they said that they will fix. The original motion, Madam Presiding Officer, is calling for an allocation of 5.8% of the national budget, which in our opinion is short-sighted and lacks a comprehensive view of the broader fiscal governance and constitutional issues at play. So while it is important and while we agree that there should be greater funding, this needs to be done in a manner that is fiscally responsible, transparent, and aligned with the self-government bills in Parliament. Madam Presiding Officer, we also want to belabor the point that while you are seeking greater allocation, you must prove to all of us, all taxpayers, that one, you can report and account to the people for what you have spent so far. Madam Presiding Officer, there has been 3 consecutive budget statements laid in this House, and the Chief Secretary has not reported to the people of Tobago how it spent its allocation. We do not know, based on the budget statement, how much was spent on recurrent expenditure. We do not know from the budget statement how much was spent on development program, how much was spent from URP, how much was spent on CPEP, how much we saved and transferred as unspent balances. And Madam Presiding Officer, until we can account appropriately to the people and until we can manage the resources that we currently have in a prudent manner, I want to join with the Chief Secretary in saying, in a previous dispensation when he sat on this House, it has nothing to do with funding, but it's about how you manage the resources. Thank you, Madam President.
Chief Secretary, Assemblyman Farley Chavez Augustine, member for Palatine Ransom is Speyside. You may now wrap up this debate.
Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, as a linguist, I am often mindful of the evolution of language and how language changes over time and in communities. And I'm always particularly keen on the sociolinguistic conditions that fuel such change. And there is a term that I recognize, and you know when you're getting old when they start to say them young people. You realize that the age is going up. But it's a term used by the generation beneath my generation that perhaps best frames the responses we got from the minority. And the term is simply delulu. It was a common thread throughout their presentation, a sort of willful, delusional posturing, as if they are still ignoring the views and the intelligence of Tobago people. It is why they are in the minority right now. Correct. Because they thought that Tobagonians were buying what they were selling, when Tobagonians clearly understood that they were not the best things for Tobago. And I want to begin this wrapping up by addressing this notion that somehow them get short money, we get short money, but them manage better. Because if we're having an argument of management and P&M don't occur in the same sentence, fraction, sums, nothing at all. Yes, the councillor pointed out they got short money for CPEP and we got short money for CPEP. But guess what? we got short money for CPEP and still raised their salary and managed to pay it. They didn't even consider giving the CPEP people as a living wage. They got short change for URP. We got short change for URP, and we still raised their salaries and gave them a living wage. And because we raised their salaries, it forced the central government to raise the salaries of those category of workers in Trinidad. Talked about food card and hampers, the minority leader and what was given out. You know what's interesting? Since we decided we will not walk around with food cards in our back pockets, we were able, with the same short change, to increase from $500 food cards to food cards prorated all the way up to $1,500. This administration, we're talking management, You talk about education, and I heard the councillor, and you know, I want to propose Secretary of Education that in all our secondary schools, I think English literature should be a mandatory subject so that people will get critical thinking skills that are lacking. It cannot be a boast that the THA and the Division of Education is spending identical sums as the Ministry of Education for the July-August school repair program. You see the complaints in Trinidad, protests, school that they now open, parents, they're protesting, $10 million roof, school still flood out. The Ministry of Education budget is over $8 billion, more than the entire Tobago House of Assembly. Clearly the ministry underspent and mismanaged their money so that they could not do the proper repairs to their schools. We, on the other hand, although not receiving sufficient allocation, was able to find the money, reallocate it, and carry it up to $20 million. And we know it's not perfect. We know we're still trying to get more furniture. We know that we have some work to be done and tenders are still going out. But certainly, we are doing better with less than even the ministries in Trinidad that have gargantuan sums. We're talking management. When we came into office at the sitting in January 2022, I stood in this house and I reported that the debt of the THA at that time stood at $954 million. Inherited, right? And the retort was, well, your win is your business now. We inherited that $954 million. And this evening we heard from the new Secretary of Finance that the current debt, and I want you to check it out, is $1,042,048,90. In other words, when we look at what where we reached the debt and where it is now, almost 3 years later, clearly we have managed in a superior fashion to them. And the debt we inherited from these poor managers of Tobago's economy, it was equivalent to 40% of the total allocation of the TH at the time. And then, I'm sure they're wicked, after such a debt, knowing that the THA Capital Development Funding, or DP funding, and even passing $300 million on a good day, they will join with naysayers and critics to say, look, pay all the contractors, pay them. But the value of money owed to contractors by them is way more than what 3 fiscal years sum of actual DP allocation. Much more release. And I want to point that out quickly because, and Secretary of Finance, you did a marvelous job on your maiden presentation in the House. And I want to go on record as saying that the Division of Finance has had many petals work there, but you are the best petal to have happened in the Division of Finance, Trade and Economy. The others, I don't know what they were doing. And so, when we look at the fact the Secretary of Finance took her time to clearly explain that there is a difference between allocation and release. In other words, what they jump up in Parliament on Monday and say we will get is often what we will not get. And she pointed out how the ministry has illegally withheld releases from us, and she did so from the period 2017 to present. So when you are telling people we get more money, speak truthfully. Speak to the actual releases and not the allocation that you know that your colonial masters in Trinidad are not sending to the people of Tobago. Speak to that. Further, I want to correct, and that's not even an error, because I don't understand how you are an accountant, how you worked in the THS system for so many years, and don't understand how the THA and public accounts work. The bond financing monies were spent between September, October, and November to early December 2021. Therefore, the reporting will naturally occur in the fiscal period that is 2022, because most of it was spent in the 2 months preceding the December 6th election.
Correct.
They see election coming, they see the handwriting on the wall. They couldn't interpret the handwriting on the wall as in Babylonian days, but they realized something coming and they ran and they spent all the money. The reporting line happened in fiscal 2022, but it was not spent by this administration. And the councillor should have known that. The councillor worked in the Division of Finance. So that's a deliberate misleading of the people of Tobago and this house, Madam Presiding Officer. Then I want to speak to the issue of procurement process and prudent management. Let me tell you, this administration has had more Auditor General audits than any other. The Auditor General missing years for THA. But every year they are here. And given that they are here every year, if the Auditor General found anything, we would have known already. We would have known already. The issue about paying contractors.
Members, please, when somebody is presenting, allow them to do so uninterrupted. Please continue.
Madam Presiding Officer, the issue of paying contractors, they're making it look as though we don't give contractors any money. Although most of that debt is inherited, and I show the difference between the inherited debt of the THE of 954 million to the current debt of just 1.42 billion. And despite inheriting some bad debts, to date, we have spent in excess of $68 million paying Tobago contractors. I even heard talk about phone bill. But you know what's strange? I have on my desk right now from T&Tech bills owed by the whole THA for almost a decade. If T&Tech want T&Tech to shut off the lights across the whole space, unpaid. And then I thought the councillor, given the opportunity to speak after the petal, would have spoken about the injustice and the wickedness at the Ministry of Finance, where CAF gave donation to oil spill, they keep it. The PRIF CCRIF gave insurance money, they keep it. And then when it comes to the IOTPF, and I want to tell you this, with ITOF, we made submissions to get monies. You know how the THA knew that we made submissions to get monies? It's a good thing BA lost my luggage and I had to look for a suit to go to the House of the Lords, and I saw representatives from Trinidad shopping in Oxford Street to tell me, oh, we come to see how much money we could get for oil spill. We don't know if money come or if money go. But clearly, the intent is not to support Tobago. So whether it was Eric Williams, Hurricane Flora, they keep it and spend it. The Link Road money, they keep it and spend it. We have a court case now for 80 million for that. Right? Beryl, they keep it and spend it. Oil spill, they keep it and spend it. COVID, they keep it and spend it. Any grant funding where THA and Tobago is concerned, they keep it and spend it. And instead of the supporters in Tobago saying you can't do that, that is not right. They sit down and accept that. But you see, Madam Presiding Officer, some people have Stockholm Syndrome. And Stockholm Syndrome might be an apt phrase for people who are part of this cult called the PNM. Because they're so accustomed to abuse that they don't know when they have a good offer from a bad offer. You're here today asking this House, and based on how the amendments were framed, as if this House should just support carte blanche the current bills before the Parliament, saying that they could give us 6.8. But I remember 2013. I was a young man caught up in the toss of the politics, getting excited. And two things PNM told us in that election. PNM told us reject the Kamla bill, which offered 8%, reject it. And then on top of that, they come back and tell us that a Calcutta ship coming. Two things. And we all in Tobago got up, we rose up, we said, nah, that Kamla bill ain't good. Kamla ain't going to come and take over this place. No, we don't want that. And we voted overwhelmingly for PNM. And then the same people who told us we couldn't accept Kamla bill unless they have 200 miles, come in and tell us, state the bills as they are. Although we are offering you less than somebody else, although we're offering you less than what you told us was not good enough, take it as it is, because that's a better bill. You see how deceptive? I don't know who more deceptive, PNM or the serpent that interacted with Eve. I don't know who more deceptive. That is deception at the highest. But I want to speak to one issue where the Tobago bill is concerned. Just one, Madam Presiding Officer. Because there are, in fact, many issues with the Tobago bill. And the reality is, I am on record as saying, we don't need to throw out the bills. Let us amend those bills to the extent they need to be amended and pass it. In fact, that is what I said to the central government, Mr. Hochoy Charles and myself, in November of 2021. And I have no regret sitting down and signing a document along with Mr. Hochoy Charles when it comes to Tobago autonomy. Because I know if he's in the room, we're in the correct place. Right? And all we did was to send to the Parliament and all parliamentarians a list of the differences between the bills sent down from former Chief Secretary Orville London and what was in existence in those bills. Some critical areas, and I just want to talk to one, which is the issue of defining Tobago. Yes. The bill seeks to define Tobago in a short change, PNM style way, and leave the notion of what constitutes Trinidad open for interpretation. And one of the vexing issues is that the Tobago position is not being recognized. We, meaning the people of Tobago, made very clear how it wanted Tobago to be defined. The Tobago position has been that Trinidad will comprise the island of Trinidad and other islands of the archipelago, which are enclosed as amended by the 2006 judgment, and Barbados,
Member.
as well as...
Minority Councillor, can you please step out and answer your phone? I'm going to caution everybody for the last time. Put your phones on silent or take them off. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President Officer. So yes, so what Tobago sent down is this, that Trinidad will comprise the island of Trinidad and other islands of the archipelago that are enclosed as amended by the 2006 judgment, and Barbados, as well as the jurisdictional limits mutually established in the intervening maritime areas separating the island of Trinidad from Tobago. But what we send down defines Tobago as such. Tobago shall comprise the island of Tobago, Little Tobago, St. Giles Island, Marble Island, Goat Island, Sisters Island, and other offshore islands, the archipelagic water lying landward, of the established strait base lines, as well as the 12-mile territorial sea measured seaward from the said baselines, and the super-adjacent airspace above these two aforementioned maritime areas, and over the land space, and shall exercise sovereign and other rights over the living and non-living resources in the area around Tobago, designated as the exclusive economic zone under Part 3 of the Archipelagic Waters and Exclusive Economic Zone Act, number 24 of 1986, which extends to the limits established by internationally recognized maritime boundaries and limits agreed to in maritime areas lying between Tobago and Trinidad, and in a maritime area where no bilateral limits have been agreed to with the two neighboring states concerned, to 200 nautical miles measured from the relevant baseline drawn around Tobago. That's what former Chief Secretary Mr. London and this House sent down to Trinidad. And they like to tell us that when PNM in Tobago and PNM in Trinidad Tobago get what it wants, that's a lie. Tobago is advantaged when PNM is in Tobago and PNM is in Trinidad. And I want to end by giving you an example. Because they try to make the point that somehow we get it better with Imbert than they did. And that is because me and sitting down here like no jack and not talk up on behalf of the people of Tobago. I am going to Imbert and telling what should happen. And so very early, in fact, the first member of cabinet I met with as chief secretary was the Minister of Finance. And in that very first meeting, I said quite clearly, we're not accepting any month-to-month. Perhaps nobody told him that before, but I made it very clear. And that, by definition, is not doing things the same way. That, by definition, is saying if you are accustomed to a docile and passive Tobago that accepts anything, that ended on December 6, 2021. That's different. So this motion I brought to the House today is not to beg for more money. In fact, I was super reasonable. I didn't even say give us 6.9 according to the DRC. It was accepted by the Parliament. The Parliament accepted this report. It's not a piece of paper in somebody's office. The Parliament accepted this report as a regulation. And they're still breaking it. We ain't even getting within the bandwidth. Because when they do the midterm review, we're getting far less. Not even retaining the same 4.03%. And yet the minority is telling us, let us pass this bill and you'll get more money. Who is to say that they will actually observe the law this time? They have broken every law when it comes to Tobago. The law says give us quarterly in block, meaning we should get 4 equal payments. They break that. The law says that all revenues, tax and non-tax revenues in Tobago must remain in Tobago. They break that. The law says that where the revenues are in excess of the appropriation or the allocated sum, 50% must remain in Tobago. They break that. Who said that they wouldn't break our next law? And then the minister, like Lord of all, he decides whether he wants to give or not give. Madam President Officer, how much more time do I have? Do I have 5 minutes? I don't need all of that. But I need some of that to share excerpts of a legal opinion sought by the Ministry of Finance in the year 1999, 5th of January 1999. This legal opinion was provided to the ministry by one Russell Martino, senior counsel, and might I now add ORTT, because he was just awarded the highest honor by the country. And this is what Mr. Martino is saying, because it's not now we're grappling with this. every chief secretary from 96 to now grappled with the same problem. Mr. Charles, when Mr. London probably stayed quiet except when People's Partnership in power, he raised his voice. All of a sudden, we know about protocol and the right thing to do, and encroachment. And I am still reading news articles where he's complaining about people coming up here and giving out grants and giving out this and this encroachment on THA. Mr. Charles, he didn't get an easy time from his own members. They kick him out faster than you think. And then, of course, we have the shortest serving chief secretary in our history. And everyone grappled with this same problem. But this is what Russell Martino had to say. He looked at the Exchequer and Audit Act. He looked at 5.2 of that act. 5.2 of that act gives the minister some authority if there are extenuating circumstances to reduce the spend across the space. But he says, and I quote, "It follows that where there are no exigencies of the financial situation rendering limitation or suspension of expenditure from the consolidated fund, the minister must credit the House of Assembly in quarterly releases in advance en bloc. Even where the minister acts on the alleged basis of exigencies of the financial situation, he must do so reasonably and in good faith and upon proper grounds." Wade Administrative Law, 6th edition. There is nothing to the point that by Section 3 of the Exchequer and Audit Act, the minister has the management of the consolidated fund, or that by Regulation 63.2 of the Financial Regulations application shall be made to the Treasury to incur expenditure. Parliament has said in Section 47 of the THA Act how the minister will carry out his responsibility for management of the consolidated fund in relation to the Tobago House of Assembly. Further, Regulation 63.2 cannot override Section 47 of the THA Act. Under the latter, there is no need for the House of Assembly to apply for releases. Releases are to be made automatically each quarter. Releases are to be made automatically each quarter. It follows that the full detailed requirement of Regulation 63.2 does not apply to the Tobago House of Assembly, even though the House of Assembly should give enough detail for the Treasury to satisfy the Auditor General that the sums to be authorized by the Treasury would be lawfully authorized in accordance with the Appropriation Act. I am fortified in my conclusion above because of the purpose and history of the THA Act. As can be seen from the long title, the Act is to provide for, inter alia, powers and functions of the Tobago House of Assembly. The THA Act is intended to give powers to the Assembly and to liberate it, end quote. In other words, Russell Martino, Senior Counsel, ORTT, was saying since 1999 to the Ministry of Finance, you don't have the power to just decide if you're going to give the money or not give the money. You don't have the power to decide when you give the money. The law prescribes it for you strictly. Out of the goodness of my heart, and perhaps that's my biggest flaw, being too nice. And I remember asking, when we going to court, perhaps all the goodness out of my heart, I said to the minister, look, you say I have a cash flow problem. The law says it must be quarterly. That's what the law says. But I wouldn't bat an eye if you give 2 months in advance and then the third. So we have predictability in the system. So we can manage the outflows. That's why we have managed the overdraft facility better than they have. That is prudent management. They're using words they don't even know. They don't even know the meaning of prudent. Prudent management, and yet they left behind $40+ million in overdraft fees to be paid from their time. If you are managing prudently, then you shouldn't leave us with $954 million in debt as of January 2022. That's not prudent management. And then when we look at how they distributed contracts, that's our next story. And then the councillor came fishing for examples. So she talked about rent and lease. You know what's the big difference? The big difference is that most of the work is now being done by the workers of the division. Therefore, we have to rent more equipment for them. As a matter of fact, they ain't buying no equipment for them. The spreader and thing mash up, they didn't even leave proper spreaders. We had to spend the money and buy. And while we order and pay for them, Thank you very much. In other words, Madam President Officer, we are doing so much more work in-house that we require tools we don't have. Because the former regime didn't think it prudent to invest in tools and equipment. So now we're trying to utilize and increase and improve the productivity of the workers. We are now forced to rent more until we could get acquired. Because some of these equipment really and truly are purpose built. You can't just walk in a showroom and see a spreader sit down there. You have to pay and wait. So while we wait, we see a natural increase in rent and lease. And I am of the opinion, and I've said it to the Secretary of Finance, I've said it to the Secretary of Infrastructure, if I have my way, do away with rent and lease completely and have sufficient equipment for the
Remember,
division.
you have 1 minute remaining.
But, Madam Presiding Officer, this team will remain with the motion as originally tabled. On the matter of the bills before Parliament, our position remains the same. There is no need to write over the bill, but there is a need for serious and critical amendments to the bills that are there. We went as far as to provide every member of the Houses of Parliament, and I was provided again this year, a matrix that established the Tobago position, what Tobago sent down to Trinidad versus what is in the bill, to point out to them the areas of dissonance so that that can be corrected before the bill goes to the Parliament floor. You can't say to me, I will beat you up, I will mistreat you, but look this, I love you. We don't buy small talk. And so this motion is a signal to the Minister of Finance and the central government that the small talk done. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Members, as indicated earlier, there were amendments proposed. I would read each amendment in order as they were proposed. First amendment, to leave out the words, calls on the Minister of Finance to allocate no less than the Chief Secretary's recommended 5.8% at the first resolution and insert the words, agrees to support the bills currently before Parliament to increase the recommended budgetary allocation to a minimum of 6.8% of the national budget. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against, say nay. The amendment is denied. Second amendment, to leave out the words central government and insert the words Parliament after the word the and before the word urgently. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against, say nay. The amendment is denied. Third amendment, to insert the words supporting the bills currently in Parliament to increase after the word by and before the word its. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against, say nay. Nay. The amendment is denied. Honorable House, I will now put the original motion to the House. Whereas the Tobago House of Assembly, the THA, is constitutionally mandated to govern and manage the affairs of Tobago under Act 40 of 1996, and whereas the Dispute Resolution Commission, DRC, recommended that Tobago's allocation falls between 4.03% and 6.9% of the national budget, and whereas Tobago has consistently received allocations closer to the minimum 4.03%, which is insufficient to meet the island's growing needs, and whereas this underfunding severely restricts the THA's capacity to deliver essential public services, while also limiting support for key sectors that are vital to the island's economic growth and social stability. And whereas the National Budget Statement on September 30th, 2024 presents an opportunity to address the historical imbalance in funding by providing a more equitable share of the national budget to Tobago. Be it resolved that this House calls on the Minister of Finance to allocate no less than the Chief Secretary's recommended 5.8%, ensuring that Tobago has adequate funding for its critical development priorities. And be it further resolved that this House insists that the central government urgently address the historical underfunding of Tobago by increasing its budgetary allocation to adequately meet the island's expanding socio-economic needs. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against? Aye. The motion is carried. Clerk? Clerk?
Assemblyman Zoisha Hackett, member for Bethesda Lekato, how do you vote? Aye. Assemblyman Fali Augustine, member for Paltivel and Speyside, how do you vote?
Aye.
Assemblyman Joel Sampson, member for Kena Bonaccord, how do you vote?
Aye.
Assemblyman Ian Pollard, member for Mason Hall Moriah, how do you vote?
Aye.
Assemblyman Niall George, member Blackrock, how do you vote?
Aye.
Assemblyman Ray Clark, member for Lambo Lands, how do you vote?
Aye.
Assemblyman Sam Craig, member for Mount Pleasant, how do you vote?
Aye.
Assemblyman Terence Bates, Bethel New Grange, how do you vote?
Aye.
Assemblyman Nigel Tate, member for Senior Hill Patience Hill, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councillor Petal-Ann Roberts, how do you vote? Aye. Councillor Orlando Kerr, how do you vote?
Aye.
Minority Councillor Daniel Benoit, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Assemblyman Calvin Morris, member for Dal Spring Wim, how do you vote?
Abstain.
All right. From the members.
Members, the House is still in session. Thank you, Mr. Clark, and you all can see that I have a very good, quick clerk. Honorable members, as per the division that just happened, we have 11 persons voting yes and 2 voting in abstention. Motion carried.
Motion for adjournment.
Leader of Assembly Business.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I now beg to move that this House stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Honorable members, the question put is that this House now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any against, say nay. The ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed. Honorable members, good evening.